I'm Luke and welcome back to What's the Point Anyway? This is my conversation with fellow Aussie, Catherine Gavin. I hope you enjoy it, and for those that do enjoy it, please do what you can to help out the show, subscribe, like, or share the episode with a friend. Every bit helps. Thanks so much.
I went on the Burrows podcast probably at least 12 months. It might have been like 18 months ago. It's quite some time ago. And then Rick's been a guest on mine as well. Yeah, he's a lovely guy.
Yeah, I actually saw that one where you were interviewing him.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. He's got a good story, and he's got like a great demeanor, Rick. Like he's a lot sort of, I'll say this in a nice way, not a bad way, but like a lot softer and more caring than I am.
He's very caring. Yeah, very kind and easygoing, it seems, from what I can tell.
Yeah. Perfect. Well, I'm glad he connected us. He obviously gave me a bit of background to you when he connected us on email, and then I've since listened to your testimony that you did on their show. But he was like, he's connected me with a few guests that I've had on, but he sort of knows what I try to do on the show, and I think he's always sort of half on the lookout, or he'll often reach out and say, "Oh, you should try to speak to this person." When he connected me with you, and I found out that you're a fellow Aussie, I was very keen to listen to his endorsement. So thanks for joining.
Yes, no problem. Yeah, I was not aware that there were any other like-minded people in Australia until I connected with a few preterists through Facebook, and then one of them, Dawn Stead, told me about the conference in Sydney, and then asked me if I could speak at it. And then I became aware of all these people like yourself who have the same sort of understanding eschatology.
Yeah. Perfect. So I guess the title of the show, What's the Point Anyway, forms the basis of the conversation. So I don't know if you've thought about it, but should we start with that question, and then we'll unpack your worldview and talk a little bit how you got here. So have you come into it, when I say have you come into it prepared, that I'm quite happy with people that don't come prepared, because we have a fantastic unscripted conversation. But what are your thoughts on the question, what's the point anyway?
Yeah, I think that's an excellent question, very important question, because you can do a whole lot of study and gather more and more knowledge and become an expert on first century history, for example. But what does it mean for us spiritually?
Yeah.
To me, that is the most important question. What is the, when we boil it all down, what does it all mean?
Yeah.
How is it important to us in our day-to-day life? And so the conclusion I've come to, as far as understanding the Bible, understanding eschatology, what's most important to understand is that God's kingdom is a kingdom of holiness and righteousness. And so we have to come to God in broken submission, humble ourselves before Him, and put off our old man with his deeds, like it says in Colossians. Put on the old man, put on the new man, I should say, which is created in Christ Jesus in holiness and righteousness. And, in Romans it says to walk in newness of life, walk in new life in the Spirit.
Yeah.
And so for me, all this knowledge about eschatology in the Bible all boils down to that.
Yeah,
really.
Yeah.
Walking in the Spirit, living in the kingdom now.
Yeah. Yeah, I totally hear you. I actually, as you know, I sent you a message before just saying that if you were ready to go earlier, we got the kids in bed pretty early tonight, so it was pretty smooth. So I was good to go 10, 15 minutes earlier, but you were doing a few things, which was fine. So I was sitting there, and I actually had a book on my shelf that I just got today. So I started just flicking through the first couple of pages, and there was a quote in it that like just struck me straight away, and it ties in with that. And it was that the theologian died and went to the gates of heaven and asked him, would you like to enter into heaven, or would you like to enter into a lecture talking about what is in heaven? And the theologian said, well, I'll go to the lecture, thanks. And I think that's it ties in, and this is just, it's eschatology, but it's everything as well. I think Christian faith, when it becomes purely intellectual, can quickly become pretty dead.
Yes, pretty dead and pretty pointless.
Yeah.
And you've lost the whole reason, the essence behind it.
Yeah. Do you think that explains, because definitely within preterism you have a lot of smart men and women, like
Mhm.
because it takes a certain intellect to be able to really study the scriptures properly and to break from sort of mainstream interpretations and really sort of dig into things and put them in their right sort of context and audience relevance and all these sorts of things. So there's definitely a uniformity with the types of people that you see that become preterists. And there's also, I don't know, I think maybe some people play this up more than others, but it's definitely the case in other sort of streams of faith as well. But there are, a lot of people that end up going to this Israel only route and saying that,
Mm.
well, actually the Bible is just a story that was written that reached its completion long ago and has no relevance for us today.
Mhm.
Do you think that ties in with that sort of intellectual way of looking at it all?
It can do. Yes, that is a very sad conclusion, I think, that some people go to.
Mm,
And I guess if you're coming from a purely intellectual perspective and you've not actually had a genuine experience of being born again by the
yeah,
Spirit,
yeah,
that might be the sad conclusion you come to.
yeah,
And it can really shakes your tree, when you start questioning things that you've always believed. And, when you start considering that all prophecy has been fulfilled, it is a whole paradigm shift in
mm,
the whole way you see the Bible. And that can, I guess, it can lead people to complete atheism at times.
yeah,
So, what I tend to think of is that you need to kind of work out, okay, in the midst of all that, what do you know to be true?
yeah,
And hold on to that. It's a little bit like it feels like riding a ship in a storm sometimes. You
yeah,
just need to hold on to the wheel and keep your path straight and keep
yeah,
moving forward and not allow it to unravel you,
mm,
unravel your faith,
yeah,
unravel your mind. Yeah, so that's why I think it's really important to consider the principles, these basic principles in the Bible about holiness, about righteousness. They are everlasting principles that
yeah,
continue on forever and ever.
yeah, yeah, yeah. I totally hear you. I think when you turn the scriptures into just an intellectual challenge, you really lose the essence of them. And I think that's true in preterism, but I think it's true. I sort of had a stint where I sort of got sucked into the whole end times sort of area. And there's some super smart people in that, but they've now turned sort of the Bible into something that they think is a puzzle to be worked out to piece
Mhm.
where we are now. And it's like, when you strip it all back, you're like, I don't think that's why the Bible was left to us, to be a a crossword that only the smartest people can can piece together. So it's really,
Exactly.
the more I look at it, the more I look at how a lot of people use the Bible and have the Bible in their lives, it can end up being very sad.
Yes, yes, that's right. Really, as we gain more and more understanding, we should be able to strip away all the confusing
Mm,
doctrines and teachings of men and come with something that's really, in essence, quite simple.
yeah,
So, yeah, I mean, it's not meant to be about intellect at all.
yeah,
I think that really it's more about having curiosity
yeah,
and having a desire to know truth.
yeah,
So I'm certainly not, I would not call myself an intellectual, that's for
yeah,
sure.
yeah,
But I have a curiosity and I'm willing to ask questions because you'll never find the answers unless you're willing to ask the questions.
yeah,
But I think that also sometimes people become very comfortable in their denominations and in the way they've always been taught or believed, and they're not willing to
yeah,
step outside of that.
yeah,
So you've got to be willing to step outside your comfort zone and think
yeah,
outside the square.
yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a pretty key theme if you read the New Testament too, isn't it? Like if you picture yourself in first century Jerusalem as those first early followers. Like, they were all out of their comfort zone. None
Mm.
of them, none of them that actually ended up following were like, look, this ticks enough boxes and it's familiar enough to me. Like, they all, they saw signs and they were like, we believe this guy's the Messiah, but we think he is, but to truly follow him, we're stepping into a chasm here, which is a chasm of faith. Not, they were all,
Mhm.
if it didn't make you feel sort of uncomfortable based on what their pre-existing worldviews were, I think they were doing it wrong.
That's right. Because when you think about the Jews had been practicing, for example, their
Mm,
feast days, and all those sort of rituals year after year at their appointed times, generation after generation, very ingrained. And I think that's
yeah,
why Jesus sometimes used the word mystery. And also
yeah,
Paul used the word, he talked about the mystery of the
yeah,
kingdom
yeah,
because it was a mystery to many
yeah,
of the people back in those days. It's
yeah,
actually still a mystery to many people today.
yeah. Do you think it's so as I mentioned to you in our messages, I actually became Catholic a week ago.
Mhm.
Which
Wow.
those that have followed this show sort of have seen the journey a little bit of me getting there. There was episodes maybe 4 months ago where I would like rag on Catholicism, and then I had an
Mhm.
episode with Mesh Mesha, who you might know. She's a fellow Aussie. She's in a few of the Facebook groups. Is it? She's a preterist that was Catholic, and you're Catholic. I was like, surely not. Like, we're a bunch of preterists.
Mhm.
Like, we're a bunch of people that know the Bible. How on earth are you Catholic? But I was like, I'd love you to come on the show, and I'd love to just explore this position a little bit more because it's doesn't make any
Mhm.
sense to me at all. And then I've basically gone on this sort of 4-year journey to end up back at Catholicism, which I mean, I just wouldn't have ever believed that going back in time.
Right.
But when you touched on mystery there, this is one thing that's sort of big on, and I'm still actually, to be honest, I'm definitely a novice in Catholic faith. There's still a lot of things that I don't have answers on there. But the
Mhm.
Catholic Church still talks a lot about mystery, and that mystery is something that, but it's quite bold in its pronouncement of the kingdom having come. But then it ties in a lot more mystery than I see in typically in sort of the preterist circles where because we're intellectual a lot, I think a lot of us think that all of the answers can be worked out. Whereas the
Mhm.
Catholic position is a little bit more like, yes, there's some very clear things, but there are also mysteries that we simply won't know and we can't know in this lifetime. Do you hold to that idea, or do you go against the idea that there's still mysteries?
Well, I think that we are all, if we have the Holy Spirit to lead and guide us into all truth,
Yeah.
that we are able to understand the things that are written in the Bible
Mhm.
because the Bible interprets itself,
Mhm.
basically, when you consider context and all those things.
Yeah.
Some things are very difficult for us to grasp with our finite minds. I'll agree with
Yeah.
that.
Yeah.
There are some subjects that I don't really like to argue with people about because I think, wow, like, are you going to try and dissect that one?
Yeah. Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
a bit hard for us to grasp.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think basically when the Bible uses the word mystery, it is something that we should be able to grasp, but we're talking about a spiritual kingdom that you have to be able
Yeah.
to look with spiritual eyes, not
Yeah.
physical, carnal perspective.
Yeah. What then do you make of the whole, like, because it's funny, like, I've had this discussion lots, particularly over the last week with a lot of fellow preterists, of saying that if you say full preterism, it is not a monolithic position whatsoever. Like, there is so much
Mm.
division. And when I say division, I mean, there is infighting and disagreement, but I mean division in terms of two super smart people that take both full preterists. They both believe in fulfillment, and yet they take an entirely different position on some key parts of it. So, like, obviously, there's the whole like corporate body versus individual body view. Where do you sit on that question?
Okay, yeah, I do find it really interesting how there can be such a variation in
Yeah,
beliefs, even within fulfilled eschatology.
yeah,
That's why actually I don't like to use the word preterism usually because a whole bunch of people can call
yeah,
themselves preterists. They believe quite differently, but so I like the word fulfilled
yeah. I like
because
fulfilled
that's
too. Yeah,
yeah.
yeah,
But you mean what do I think particularly about the corporate body versus the individual, or just
yeah. Firstly, what's your position? Do you hold to sort of the corporate body view or the individual body view?
That's interesting. Yes. So I can't say I've looked deeply into that, but I'm just trying to understand the scriptures. And I can see that sometimes scriptures, I believe, are talking about the body of Christ in a corporate sense.
Mm-hmm.
Yes. But within the body, there are individuals. So I
Yeah,
think it's both.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah. Individuals are important, but then some things are described or spoken of in a corporate sense.
Corporate
I can
sense.
see both.
Yeah. So, what about like? I just replied to one of his posts just then, like Robert Cruikshank Jr. Right?
Mm,
Have you dealt much with Rob Cruikshank?
no.
Oh, so he's one of he speaks at he's I'm not I wouldn't sure I wouldn't call him a pastor, but he's given a whole bunch of talks at like Berean Bible Church.
I'm aware of that church group.
Yeah, so he's I mean, they're sort of like the OG when it comes to preterism, and so Robert's like very much sort of a respected sort of elder statesman in the space.
Hmm.
He's like incredibly an incredibly good theologian. And like there's things he's given sermons on things like intricate detail about like the book of Esther being fulfilled in the Gog and Magog war, and like he's a super smart guy and he knows his scriptures. But then he is adamant that the true full preterist position has a individual body view where it's not until we die that we receive the fullness of things. Like that yes, yes, everything's fulfilled, but we don't experience any of the sort of the fullness and the idea of like heaven is a post mortal death experience. And then you'll get, say, like Tim Martin or Ward Fenley, and Ward and Tim have both been on my show, that are more the corporate body, and they're like, no, these are corporate all talking about corporate resurrection, and therefore this has all happened. So the fullness of heaven is here with us now on this earth. And I find it funny that like Tim, Ward, and Bob are all incredibly smart with the scriptures, like 10 times smarter than I am. And they've come to totally different conclusions
Hmm.
on such, like, it's a pretty
Hmm.
fundamental question. Do we have the fullness of the kingdom right here, right now, or is it only when we die that we experience it? So that's where, like, that's for me where I've landed on an idea where I'm a bit more comfortable with mystery, because I think, I mean, I've only been Christian 3.5 years, and sure, I've studied and I've come to
Wow.
a position that I'm pretty confident in,
Yes.
and I've argued against Bob's position. I've thought, no, that doesn't make sense. But I wonder now, like, is the truth of it some sort of blend of the two that none of us can put correctly in intellectual terms with our sort of finite minds here?
Yeah, it's hard to get your head around some of this stuff.
Yeah.
Yeah. So, yeah, it's about how you understand some of the epistles, I think, and how
Mm,
Paul explains some of these matters. So in Ephesians 1, it talks about all things, both which are in heaven and which are on earth, being gathered together as one in
yeah.
Christ.
Yeah.
So I think this is something to do with, the kingdom of God exists. Well, this happened at the end of the Old Covenant age,
Mm-hmm.
that the kingdom of God existed both in the heavenly realm and on earth.
Mm-hmm.
So whether you were physically dead or physically alive, you were still inside the kingdom of God.
Yeah.
So that's kind of how I see it. But
Yeah.
that's something I'm still actually studying and fleshing out for myself.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
But it is a very important subject, actually.
Definitely. Well, maybe we can circle back a bit and talk about how you've got here, and maybe we can go the whole way back.
Mm-hmm.
I listened to your testimony, so we won't just do like a repeat of that.
Sure.
Do you want to just give a bit of an overview of what like your initial upbringing was like, and how you first sort of came to believe in Christianity is the truth?
Okay. So, yeah, my parents were Catholic.
Mm-hmm.
Like my dad's parents were Catholic and his parents were Catholic.
Nominal Catholics. Yeah.
Yeah, well, my mum actually was brought up with no religion. She had a
Yeah.
bit of a rough upbringing,
Yeah.
but they came together. My mum decided to become Catholic, but they weren't very committed churchgoers.
Mm-hmm.
They didn't go to the Catholic parish very much.
Easter, Christmas.
Probably Easter, Christmas
Yeah.
initially,
And
maybe a little bit more than that.
tick the census box saying I'm Catholic.
That's it,
Yeah.
exactly. I'm Catholic by like a label that you wear.
Yeah.
I'm Catholic.
Yeah.
Yes. So I was christened and had a few of those experiences. Like I was confirmed into the Catholic Church,
Yeah.
actually, had my confirmation
Yeah.
ceremony, my first confession, and various things like that. I was sent to Catholic primary school. I actually went to 7 different schools all up, and some of them were Catholic and some were state schools, or what the Americans call public schools.
Yeah.
And yeah, so I sort of knew about Jesus,
Mm-hmm.
probably through Christmas, through the
Yeah.
Nativity story, really. But he was a far off, distant, kind of mysterious character that didn't know much about.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed hearing Bible stories.
Yeah.
Yeah, they really intrigued me and made me feel really comfortable.
Did you think, like, if you can go back to your memory at that point in time, because I think,
Mm.
I mean, your description is probably a fairly common one, right?
Mm.
The sort of ticker box Christian family that you go
Mm.
along, you do these things, and they feel good. Like there's nothing bad
Mm.
about them, but it's it's just a toe in the water, and then you go back to life as usual. But like when you're at that point, did you think that did you think that God was real and that Jesus was real, or was it you didn't even really think about it?
When I was very young, I think I didn't think that much about it, but it was like a given sort of to
Yeah,
me. It was like, yeah, oh yeah.
yeah,
But it's kind of like when I got to the age of 15 and I met some neighbors
yeah,
who were talking about Jesus, like they had a relationship with him.
yeah,
I thought, yeah, I do believe in Jesus.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah. He kind of, I reached a crossroads, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
you thought, I realized. And because in my early teens, I did become quite rebellious and
Yeah.
doing a lot of naughty things.
What was the
But
worst thing? I had a shocking teenage period too. What was the worst thing you did?
well, I started like smoking when I was 14, and
Yeah,
I would basically, if there was any opportunity to drink alcohol, I would take it to the max.
yeah,
The first time I got a bit drunk was actually at the Catholic parish,
yeah, yeah,
believe it or
yeah,
not. Anyway, that was terrible. Yeah, I just started wagging school and stealing things from shops.
yeah,
My mum would ask me, "Oh, where'd you get that jacket from?" And I would lie,
yeah,
say someone gave it to me.
yeah,
But that was probably for me, that was the worst thing on my conscience, was the fact that I started lying to my mother.
yeah, 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 yeah,
It was really started to kill me that I was
yeah,
doing that, uh, living this sneaky life. And I believe that God was actually working on me back then.
Yeah, 100%.
Working on my conscience, even through the Bible stories that I'd heard as a
Yeah.
child.
Yeah.
You know, those little influences, they do sow a seed there.
Yeah.
So, when my mum, I think my mum was a little devastated that I wasn't interested in going to the Catholic parish anymore.
Mm-hmm.
I said it was, I thought it was boring.
Yeah.
And so she started looking around and meeting different people that went to different sort of church groups.
Yeah.
And one of them invited us to our neighbor's house. And that was right at the time when I think I was at that crucial time
Yeah. Yeah.
when I needed to make a decision, go this way, keep going the track I was going down and get worse and worse,
Yeah.
or choose the straight and narrow way.
Yeah.
Yeah. But it did actually, even though when I was 15, my eyes were opened, it took a few years for me to realize that to follow Jesus meant that I had to forsake
All the
sin.
other things. Yeah.
I had to forsake all the other things that I was
Yeah.
wanting to try and experiment with in the world.
Yeah. And so what was
Yeah.
that with the neighbours from your conversation with Rick that ended up being, was it like a Pentecostal sort of group that ended up more or less being a cult? Is that correct? Am I right in saying that?
Oh, wow. Yes, they were Pentecostal based at that time when
Yeah.
I first came in contact with them. And then they went through various phases. We kept changing our name and letting go of doctrines and taking on new doctrines and evolving our understanding. Really, I should say it was my pastor who
Yeah.
was changing his mind.
Yeah.
And he was very good at convincing the rest of us.
Yeah.
Like he could sell it to us.
How many people would he had in his flock?
Well, we lost quite a few people over
Yeah.
time. Maybe when I was last there, it was perhaps 30 or so people. So it
Yeah.
was a
Yeah.
small
Yeah.
group.
Yeah.
Uh,
What would be
and
like an example of like a big doctrinal change that he went through?
okay, so first of all, we started off quite charismatic
Mm-hmm.
and we would just do things, for example, like would be slain in the spirit, would fall down on the ground
Yeah.
and then we started to realize I don't think that's biblical
Yeah.
doing that. Oh, that was just one small thing, but then that led to bigger changes.
Yeah.
So when we became a holiness church, there was this idea that what we call the Adamic nature,
Yeah.
the sinful nature, could be purged out of your heart
Mm-hmm.
when you were fully sanctified by God, and
Mm-hmm.
then you could live above willful sin
Mm-hmm.
with a pure heart motive towards God. So before we became a holiness church, my pastor actually preached very hard against sin. He was
Mm-hmm.
a bit of a fire and brimstone preacher.
Yeah.
But when we became a holiness church, that took it to another level.
Yeah.
We were talking about having a pure heart before God.
Yeah. What was it like when you're in like a denomination like that? I've actually fortunately never been to a hardcore Pentecostal
Mm.
sort of church session. I did start going to a so-called non-denominational church and learnt about 4 or 5 visits in when we were a week away from the Feast of Pentecost, and he started talking about it. I was like, oh no, I've landed in a Pentecostal church. They were very big on like, I mean, it was this guy, to be honest, he's sort of just like an egomaniac who would get up on stage and talk for 2.5 hours and say they were a word-based church. But then he'd do things like he would say, I'm feeling in my heart, like that anyone, I'm feeling a call for anyone that's dealing with cancer. If there's anyone with cancer, come up to the front, and then they'd be laying their hands on. And no, I don't know. I probably went to one more session after that. I was like, come on, like, and someone to go out, like, I don't know, their cousin's got cancer or something, and praying over them, and it just felt so contrived, right? And so when you talk about the being slain in the spirit, like falling on the floor and rolling over and that sort of stuff, when the pastor says something that is something that extreme, I feel like some of these churches continue doing it because to admit that they were wrong in doing it in the first place just feels so foolish, right? When he said, hey, guys, all this being slain in the spirit and falling over, it's actually not biblical. And all the time we've been doing this, it's just been a bit silly. Like, what's the reaction to something like that?
Yes. Well, yeah, it's always a bit of a surprise when you're told we're changing direction now because we were wrong.
Yeah. But I mean, like being
Yes.
wrong on, I don't know, like even going back to say preterism, like being wrong on, hey, you know, I thought it was an individual body view, but it's actually those verses are talking about the corporate body. That's one thing, but another is to be like, hey, we were wrong on like rolling around on the floor, you know, and doing crazy things like that, which is where and I know this is a case with like things like speaking in tongues. I
Mhm.
know a lot of people have a hard time when they do it and then come to realize actually, no, that's not biblical. But hey, for the last 10 years, I've been making these noises. It's hard for me to admit that that was just totally made up in my mind.
Yes, yes. Some people don't want to admit that
Yeah.
because it's a very humbling experience when
Yeah,
you
I can
realize
imagine.
you're wrong,
Yeah.
especially when you went around preaching it to other people,
Yeah,
telling
yeah,
other
yeah.
people how good it
Yeah.
was, and then you think, "Oh, no, I was
Yeah, yeah,
wrong."
yeah. Yeah.
So I think, yeah, I found that very humbling, the
Mhm.
experience of letting go of certain doctrines and taking on new ones or
Yeah.
understanding the Bible in a more correct way. And it really changed me so
Mm.
that I find that now I tend to be more willing to listen to other people and be with a more humble attitude.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because I have been very wrong before,
I
and I could still be wrong
I
about
meant
some things.
amen to that. I'm just I mean, the Catholicism one for me is like hit me for 6, but it's the end of many things where I've been like certain on something and then been so totally wrong on it that
Mm,
yeah, I'll never. It's been a lesson in humility for me over the last few years with a whole bunch of those things. But we grow from it. I think if we can, I think it's a test. Like if you can get through things like that and not let your pride take over and dig your heels in and say I'm digging in even though I think I'm wrong here. It's a real growth experience from us as individuals and as followers of Christ, I think.
absolutely. Yeah, it's very important lesson to be humble
Yeah.
and meek.
So when did you end up breaking from that pastor and what was the thing that tipped you over the edge?
So I was about 40 years old when I left that group.
Mhm.
So I'd been there for basically 25 years.
Yeah.
And it was really a build-up of things over probably 10 years that I was wanting to leave before I actually left.
Yeah.
But, there was concern that if you left the group that you would be falling away, that you
Mhm.
would possibly go to hell.
Yeah.
Yes. So also my mother was going there and my friends were there. I considered them my family,
Yeah.
really. So it was a huge thing to leave.
Had you cut yourself off from a lot of the rest of the world as a result of being involved in that church?
Well, personally, I probably did.
Yeah.
I went to work and things like that, but I I would have work associates. I never considered them my friends,
Yeah,
though.
yeah, yeah. Yeah.
I wouldn't really socialize with them. That was really my own personal choice. I was probably a bit extreme.
Yeah.
But, now I will talk to all sorts of people,
Yeah.
uh, But no, I was still operating in the world.
Yeah,
It
yeah,
wasn't
yeah.
like an extreme cult where we're completely cut off.
Yeah, okay.
It was more just I became concerned in the end that the amount of influence that the pastor had over all the people in the congregation,
Mm-hmm.
that it seemed like he could just about say or do anything and everyone would just accept it and
Yeah,
go
yeah,
along with
yeah.
it.
Yeah,
He could abuse someone from the pulpit
yeah,
and people wouldn't say anything about it. In fact, they would think, "Oh, well, that person deserved it."
yeah, yeah, yeah.
And that was
Yeah,
kind of making me start to think this is an unhealthy dynamic.
yeah,
And it came to the point where, yeah, he would tell some people that they should get married, and other people you shouldn't get married, and things
yeah,
like that. And that really started to bother me
yeah, yeah, yeah.
because this is affecting people's lives in
Yeah,
the implications of that are huge,
yeah,
the
yeah,
ripple
yeah.
effect of those sort
Yeah,
of decisions.
yeah. Feel free not to answer this, but like,
Mhm.
I mean, there's so many professing Christians around the world and, Christian pastors and all sorts of degrees of people that say they're Christian. And then at the same time, there's fruits that you see from a lot of these people. You're like, like, are you really Christian?
Mhm.
Do you think that pastor is actually Christian?
Ooh.
You can refrain from answering if you want, if it's a too personal a question.
Okay, let me think about that.
And you may even answer it just generally in terms of there are a lot of charlatan pastors out there.
Mhm.
Are they Christians that have gone off the boil and got caught up with their own pride, or are they people that are actually never Christian in the first place, but the role of pastor and looking after a flock of 30 people ties into their ego, and it's just they put on that facade for the rest of their life?
That's a very good point, a very good question. So, I do think that there are people that could get carried away, like could start out good perhaps,
Mm,
but having a position of authority in the church could go to their head.
yeah,
And there is some warnings in the Bible about don't let people be too young
yeah,
when they come into a position of eldership
yeah,
because they might not be able to handle it with their ego.
yeah.
But then I do believe, as hard as it is to imagine, that there will be people that never actually been Christian at all,
Mm,
but the way that church groups function, where you tend to have this pastor at the top,
yeah,
that it is the perfect opportunity for them to boost their own ego
yeah,
because you have this audience of people just waiting on your every word
yeah, yeah, yeah,
with bated
yeah,
breath, and especially if you can use scripture
yeah,
to reinforce your authority and your power over people, that is such a powerful
mm,
manipulation tool.
yeah,
So I do believe that there would be people that are just attracted to this sort of church setup because they're so needy. They have such a low
mm,
self esteem. They need to use this to boost their own ego and feel powerful over
yeah,
people.
yeah. So how long ago did you break away from it?
I'm 48 now, so that's actually, I guess
8
it's
years?
8 years ago.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Goodness.
Yeah. And when did you become preterist?
Well, I didn't really know what that word was
Yeah.
till probably a few years ago, maybe
Sorry, I
3
should
or
say,
so.
when did you believe in fulfillment? To keep
Mm,
our theme of using the right terminology.
the theme, yes, fulfilled eschatology or full preterism, you could call it that.
Yeah.
Yes, I reckon that was just a few years ago because my pastor taught us that Jesus had come back in the first century,
Mhm.
but he said he came back at Pentecost.
Yeah.
Uh, and he also taught us that when the temple was destroyed in 70 AD, that was something to do with the Great Tribulation period that Jesus was prophesying in Matthew 24. So I had some bits and pieces, little puzzle pieces, but a few pieces were missing and some were in the wrong place, and was really quite confused.
Yeah.
But I started my own Zoom group back in 2019,
Yeah.
and then a few years ago, a Texan couple came and joined us, and they believed in fulfilled eschatology.
Mm-hmm.
And so, as we studied through the epistles together, chapter by chapter, this lady in particular called Elise Campett, she started to highlight things to me. And at first, I didn't really understand a lot of the things she was saying,
Yeah.
but I could, as we went on, I could see what she was talking about. And there was a whole lot of scriptures, big sections of the Bible that I'd never really read before,
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
never taken notice of before.
Yeah.
And then I started in my own mind, started to connect the dots
Yeah.
and see, hold on a minute. Like in Matthew 23, Jesus talks about filling up the measure of your fathers, talking about, the Pharisees and Sadducees who were killing God's servants.
Mm-hmm.
And then I thought, Babylon, the
Mm.
great, the mother of harlots,
Mm.
Revelation 17 and 18, her cup is full to the brim with the blood of the martyrs. Hang
Sounds
on a
similar.
minute. Maybe she's Jerusalem
Mm.
or Judah, Jerusalem.
Yeah.
I thought that would make sense because that would tie Revelation in with the Old Testament,
Yeah.
and that would tie it all together better
Yeah.
rather than projecting everything into the future or what
Yeah.
have you.
That's the
So, yeah.
that's my view on, like, Revelation's a tricky book. Like it
Mm,
is. It's so symbolic.
it is.
It's repeats things. It goes back. It draws on. I mean, it's written to 7 churches in Asia Minor in the first century. So it's like, who are those? We don't really know anyone from those churches.
Mm-hmm.
It's different audience relevance, and it's talking deliberately in sort of code to, I think in ways that would make sense to them, but wouldn't be totally obvious to everyone.
Mm-hmm.
And so I think the biggest mistake so many people make is like trying to build an entire theology out of the book of Revelation as if it's a standalone. Whereas what
Yes.
makes so much more sense to me is that Revelation is just recapitulating and tying together what's already written in the rest of the pages. I know. Have you come
Yes.
across the Little Season guys?
No.
It's stay away. Don't even bother going there.
Really?
I actually came through it because I initially believed I was like at end times now, and then my path to seeing fulfillment was Little Season. So what Little Season says is that basically everything was fulfilled. But then what happened is the millennial kingdom was established and all the history books are incorrect and it's been wiped from history because in Revelation 27 through to 10, it says, and when the 1,000 years were finished, Satan will be released for a short season, for a little season to deceive the nations. So
Mm-hmm.
what their whole theory is that, yeah, everything's fulfilled and the kingdom's already happened, and it was sort of like this 1,000-year reign. But then 250 years ago or so, Satan was released from his chains and given dominion on. Yeah, it's insane, but it's also they're not that far off the truth. I think they're pretty close to the mark. But it's it's like you can be close to something and a million miles away at the same time, and that they're
Yes.
that. But
Yes.
the mistake they've made is they've gone to Revelation chapter 20 and
Mm-hmm.
thought that verse 7 to 10 is a standalone verse that's not referenced anywhere else in the Bible that talks about the very final 250 years of world history and then the end of things. And it's just like, that's mentioned there, but none of the other biblical writers thought to even touch on it. Yeah. So
Mm.
it's, for me, it's like you can't read Revelation as a standalone, and I think we're crazy to try to interpret the whole thing now either. I don't think it is meant to be or can be interpreted perfectly today.
Well, it is a very tough book to read. Yeah, I went through Revelation with our Zoom group,
Mm.
and it took us probably about a year and a half to go through
Yeah,
the
yeah,
whole
yeah,
thing.
yeah,
And so I've been trying to make videos about it,
yeah,
but it's very hard for me to understand every little aspect, that's for sure.
Yeah. But there's
There's some
but I mean,
mhm,
there's more than enough in there, like what you just touched on, to say that, right, Matthew 23, fill up the measure of your cup, and
mhm.
Mystery Babylon, the cup is full with the wrath, the blood of this. Okay, that is tying that back to there, and you can. I think once you realize that, well, this is certainly the case for me, that eschatology isn't just something that's dealt with in the very last book. It's dealt with in Genesis, and it's dealt with all through the Old Testament, and it's dealt with all through the New Testament.
Mhm.
It's not a new thing, um, it's all there. So you can go to other places where it's a bit clearer and see what's actually being spoken about, I think.
Yes, yeah, like you say, eschatology is all through the Bible,
Yeah,
Old Testament, all through the epistles, and not just Revelation.
yeah,
So, like, yeah, there's some elements of Revelation that you can see and understand quite clearly that are
mm,
not too hard to understand.
yeah,
And so that's enough for me, really, to
yeah,
be
yeah,
convinced that is all fulfilled.
yeah,
Even like the first chapter, of
yeah,
course, the first verse of the first chapter
yeah. And
is
the
the
last
things that will
and the last
shortly,
and the last verse of the book,
yeah,
or the
of the
second last, obviously, right just before the essentially like the sign off. But it's like it makes it
that's
pretty
right.
clear at the start and the end of it. Like anyone that's
Yeah,
done any sort of storytelling, like your beginning and your end, you make your point and then you finish with your point.
that's right.
Yeah,
So, yeah, the John wrote these things will shortly come to pass and that the time was at hand, meaning
yeah,
near.
yeah.
And like you say, yeah, it was addressed to those 7 churches, and this was also something that was a bit of a revelation to me, I guess, that these were 7 literal churches existing in Asia
Yeah,
Minor.
yeah, yeah,
That was the audience that John was writing to.
yeah.
And I just actually had a thought just this week because I kind of wondered, why was it addressed to those 7 churches?
Mhm.
And I thought, John,
As opposed to who?
well,
Or just
I
like
don't
why
know.
them what about them? Is that what
Yeah,
you
well,
mean?
what
Yeah.
about why is it addressed to these churches? And I just thought, well, it's to encourage them because of the suffering that they were going through during that 40-year transition period
Mhm.
between the old covenant and the full establishment of the new covenant.
Yeah.
Like all through the Bible, even in the Gospels, Jesus was telling his disciples, you're going to be hated of all nations for my name's sake. You're going to be betrayed by your family members,
Mm.
scourged in the synagogues, beaten, killed. You have to endure till the end of the age.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Paul in his epistles, he was writing to these various church groups to encourage them to endure, just hold on,
Mm.
keep your faith, don't give up.
Yeah.
You just have to get to the end of the
It's
age.
it's just 2,000 more years
No, well, no, they had to wait till their persecutors were,
dealt with.
well, God avenged their
Yeah.
persecutors through the destruction of Jerusalem. And
Yeah.
so that's the same thing in Revelation. I think this is a letter to encourage them to endure, hold on.
Mm.
God's judgment is coming
Mm.
upon Babylon, your persecutors, you
Yeah.
know. So anyway, that's just a thought I had.
Yeah. I mean, I've seen this as like a criticism against it. People are like, "Oh, well, it's written to it can't be dealing with Jerusalem's destruction because it's written to 7 churches in Asia Minor. So, it would have been written to the church in Jerusalem." But I was like, you missed the point. I don't think it's written and this is the problem with everyone reading it as a futurist book today, trying to puzzle it together. I don't think it's meant to be written as a warning saying like, this is your last chance. For me, it reads like, you guys have had 40 years of warnings and here's what's about to happen. Yeah,
Mhm.
it's done.
Hmm,
These
okay.
things are shortly going to pass, and this is now happening. Like, and I think by the
Mm.
time Revelation was written, obviously hold to a sort of pre-70 AD writing of it, but it's like the church was established, whether the church was beginning to get established, and they heeded their warning to get out of Jerusalem.
Mhm.
The
Mhm.
the Christians weren't stuck there in 68 AD, 69 AD, still holding
Right.
on to the old covenant. Like they were gone and they were often away.
Yes. Yeah, I believe they had opportunity to flee to the mountains.
Yeah. Which is why it makes sense that it would be written to 7 churches in Asia Minor, saying like, you guys are carrying forward the church moving forward. It's not to them saying, hey, get out of Jerusalem because this is all about to happen now. It's like, this is happening and this is what it means and this is what's coming.
Right. Yeah, yeah. It's all
Yeah.
fascinating.
So on all these studies, and I love you've spoken about this and we've spoken a bit about it too, where like you've been wrong on so many things over time that you just sort of got to remain open and humble. What's one thing with your studies that are now sort of, was it 4, 5 years old now, or 3 years in terms of seeing sort of clear fulfillment, but any part of it you think you could be wrong on?
On oh, which part? Sorry, now, or do you mean?
Yeah. So if you look at sort of your current view and your current
Yeah.
understanding of whether this is eschatology or whether it flows into something else, but is there any part of your current position where you're like, if I was wrong on that, I wouldn't be totally surprised?
Oh, right. Well, that's a very good question. I have question marks in my mind about things. There's
Mm,
things I still am on a journey of coming to understand fully.
yeah.
Um, I'm actually, this probably sounds crazy. I'm still trying to get a full grasp of what it meant that Jesus died on the cross.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Yeah. In terms of what happened at the cross or why it was on the cross?
Yeah, well, why he died on the cross,
Yeah.
why he died. One way that I've looked at it is that he purchased his bride,
Mhm.
the new covenant bride.
Mhm.
So, yeah. So I could look at it in that kind of marriage sort of context.
Yeah.
But yeah, anyway, so I'm still exploring
Would you
that
be
kind of
like
full
Paul's
understanding of what that means.
was Paul say, I think it's one of Paul's letters, isn't it? It's like you've been bought with a
Bought with a price. Yes. He has purchased you. I think that word's in
yeah.
there too. Redeemed, which is, well, it's the payment of a ransom to be
Mhm.
redeemed.
Yeah.
It's the still concept of being purchased. And I know it was an ancient Israelite custom at
Yeah.
one point was to pay a bride price.
Yeah. Yeah.
So I think the whole marriage is a powerful illustration
Mhm.
that's used in the Bible, and that fully understanding ancient marriage customs and how that pans out in the Bible will help us to understand the full context and the meaning around even Jesus' death. I think in Ephesians 5, it says that he gave himself for the church,
Mm.
that he might sanctify and cleanse it by the washing of water by the word, that he
Mm.
might present it to himself a glorious church without spot or wrinkle.
Yeah.
So he gave himself for his bride,
Yeah.
for the church, the new covenant. So just understanding what that means, I believe that Jesus' death is something we're meant to participate in.
Yeah.
It's not something we just that's separate from us that we just mentally acknowledge,
Yeah.
but it's about being in a relationship and oneness with him
Yeah.
that is putting off our old man, putting on the new man.
Yeah.
That's how we become one with Christ.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's
It's funny. I often say to people that criticize sort of the fulfilled view, and they're like, well, Christ is resurrected. We therefore need to be physically resurrected as well. So, okay, but you always keep pointing to the resurrection part, but but also says we've been crucified with him. I don't see you guys
Mhm.
lining up to get up on a cross and get crucified. So
Physically
it's
crucified.
yeah, 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 yeah. They often sort of pick and choose.
Yes.
So
Yeah.
what's it? Having come to this idea of fulfillment and sort of the joy that that brings, in terms of really your opening answer about what is the point and sort of understanding the kingdom and how we live within it.
Mm-hmm.
What's life like now for you compared to, because, you know, you've said that you're a Christian from the time you were 15, but obviously that
18.
18, yeah, that
Yeah.
Christianity has taken on many manifestations over time. I'd love to maybe just explore like the different feelings of like the question, what's the point anyway? And how does life feel different now, despite being a Christian now, the same as you were 25 years ago, but you can have, do things feel really different, or has it stayed consistent?
Well, I'm at a very different place now in some respects,
Mm-hmm.
in that in the past, I was fairly passive and I would just sit in a congregation and just expect to be fed. I mean, I
Yeah.
did read the Bible, but now I'm coming to a fuller, better understanding that slowly, that in this spiritual kingdom that is fully manifest, that we are all part of a spiritual priesthood.
Mm-hmm.
And so we all operate in this authority. We have authority to preach the word. We have authority to study for ourselves and to believe that God will open up our understanding. And we're not reliant upon any man, any person to dish up the truth to us.
Yeah.
So I guess I'm coming to a fuller understanding of that.
Yeah.
And so, of course, that also means it doesn't matter if you're male or female, which I know a lot of people in the church world are opposed to females teaching or preaching.
Yeah.
But, it's a spiritual kingdom made up of
Yeah.
spiritual people.
Yeah.
It's not about ego. It's not about trying to exercise authority over other people, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
It's
Was
just about,
I'm guessing that was a big thing with the pastor in the church that you're in for 25 years. Women
yeah.
remain silent and all that.
No, actually, no, it wasn't a women remain silent kind of thing.
Right.
No, we had female ministers actually in that
Okay.
group,
Yeah.
but our pastor was the head honcho.
The main guy.
You know,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah.
Perfect. And so what's life involved for you now, Catherine?
Well, I am continuing to study and meditate on the Word. I'm trying to finish a video series on the Book of Revelation.
Yeah.
I'm really quite eager to get to the last few chapters because they're probably my favorite,
Yeah.
19, 20, 21, 22.
Yeah.
And I've got other thoughts and ideas I'm trying to get onto paper that I'll probably turn that into a video series eventually.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, maybe turn it into a PDF and people can just help themselves to it.
Perfect.
I don't, I, yeah, for me, I don't do anything for money. I don't need any
Yeah.
money.
Yeah.
So everything's for free. And yeah, and I'm just enjoying connecting with other like-minded people that I'm coming across. There's
Yeah.
actually some Australians that believe similar.
Because where are you? You're on the sunny coast?
Sunshine Coast,
Yeah.
yeah.
Whereabouts?
Oh, it's I'm in a place called Caloundra. It's
Yeah.
yes,
Yeah. I'm
1
actually,
hour north of Brisbane.
yeah. I actually fly in there next week. We've got a wedding up there. Yeah.
To Brisbane?
No, Noosa.
Oh, to Noosa, so that's the
Yeah.
very top of the Sunshine Coast. Yeah,
Yeah.
awesome.
Yeah. So looking forward to getting some warmth up there.
Definitely would be warmer up there than down your way, down in
Yeah.
Melbourne.
What is the temperature at the moment? I'm in the bridal party, so I've got a tuxedo, but I'm a bit worried about wearing the tux in the Queensland heat.
Yeah. It's cooled down a little bit, but it varies a little day to day. I would say it's almost jumper weather, but some
Yeah,
people are
but
wearing jumpers.
Queensland jumper weather's a bit different to Melbourne jumper. Well, we're probably
Yeah,
wearing a
that's
singlet and
true.
you guys are in a jumper.
Yeah, some people are wearing jumpers now, which
Okay. Well, that's a
I
bit
haven't quite
encouraging.
got there.
Yeah.
So it's still, yeah, it's just a little bit cooler, but nothing like how it is in Melbourne.
Nice one.
We've got the
And
humidity.
so what's your YouTube channel? Anyone listening, where should they check out all your stuff?
called Crystal Clear, and you can put Crystal Clear 2260 and
Yeah,
you'll have a chance of finding it, or Crystal Clear Kath Gavin. If you
perfect.
just put in Crystal Clear, you might struggle to find it.
A common name. I'll put a link to it in the show notes anyway.
Thank you.
Awesome. Well, thanks so much for the chat, Catherine. I'm glad we got introduced by Rick. Thank you to Rick if he's listening for the introduction. And
Yes.
I'm glad I've connected with another like-minded person in Australia, of which there are not all that many of us.
No, they're scattered around the place. There's a few between the Sunshine Coast and Brisbane, and then a few down in New South Wales, and you're in Melbourne, and
Yeah,
there's other states. There's the odd one.
yeah. Nice one. All right, Catherine. Well, thanks so much. We'll stay in touch.
Thank you so much.
I'm just
Thank
going to
you.
hit stop, but don't close the up. It continues uploading, so you'll get a little pop-up.